All right, Mike.
All right, moving on here, guys. First, a word from Living for We, our new sponsor of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. What happens when a regular day at school turns into the worst day of your life? Unfortunately, that's a reality that's happening way too frequently in today's world. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for younger people in America, and in communities of color, the impact is even greater. Every bullet fired creates two victims, the person in front of the gun and the one pulling the trigger. Living for We, Keep Your Head Up is an award-winning podcast that focuses on real stories, real struggles, and real solutions in Northeast Ohio. New episodes drop every other Tuesday, including tomorrow, where you'll hear from host Marlene Harris-Taylor and her new co-host Maisha Watkins, the executive director of the Cleveland Peacemakers. No one does a better job of bringing you the stories from the front lines, victims, survivors, and those fighting for change. Each episode, they sit down with a different organization that's working to end gun violence and provide resources for those affected by gun violence. Whatever kind of help you need, there's a person for you to contact. Listen to Living for We wherever you get your podcasts or watch the video version on IdeaStream's YouTube channel. You can learn more at ideastream.com/podcasting/livingforwe. Subscribe today to Living for We on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, guys, Mary Kay in her mailbag column this week touched on a number of different topics, but one statement, and it was a throwaway statement in one of her answers, caught my eye, and I figured it'd be a great discussion for us to have today. While answering a question about how the Browns have found themselves in this quarterback situation, Mary Kay wrote, and I quote, "It's easier to project quarterbacks into the NFL now than it was 10 years ago because the college concepts have trickled up," end quote. That was the end of her answer to the question. When you look at the numbers of quarterbacks drafted in the first round and their retention rate by the same team that drafted them getting a second contract, over the last 10 drafts, it's under 50%. Jason,
What was it before that, though, Mike? Do you know what it was the 10 years before that?
I don't, but I'll look it up while you guys are answering.
Yeah, because we'd have to have that information to establish it.
Because that may sound low, but maybe it was 30% before
right.
that.
Less than 50% is still
premise,
terrible.
And it's not
it
hers.
Is still bad,
I've heard this. I've heard this same premise being repeated across the league for the last 3 years. So her premise is actually on point.
So let me just ask the question, then I'll look that up.
Yeah.
Do you guys believe and agree with Mary Kay that it's easier to evaluate quarterbacks now than it was? We'll use a decade as a reference point.
I'll just be 10 seconds.
23.
She's right. It's easier. However, the sub-headline should have read, it's still by far the most difficult position in all of sports to project. I still think that. But it is easier.
It may be easier. I don't know that I buy that it's significantly easier, but yes.
The concepts trickling up is absolutely true.
But here's what's different in the other way.
Okay.
Is that there's more pressure on teams to draft a quarterback. So even if a team is like, I don't know about this guy, there's pressure on them to draft him, especially because it's not as punitive if you do because you're not paying them what they used to. So if you screw up, you can go draft a quarterback again next year if it's that bad. So while maybe
you think it's still to me the hardest position to project. There are more variables to success at quarterback than anyone else.
Some of the most important things I think get overlooked, like how smart a guy is, how his ability to read. Yeah. Like what's in his heart?
Yeah.
Is he live, eat, breathe, sleep football? Or is this just a job for him? These things all matter.
And it's so hard to get that answer in the limited amount of time that these guys get to spend. And I'll go back to when I wrote the book after the Cavs championship. I know it's a different sport, but stick with me for 10 seconds. I was talking to David Griffin, and he was blunt in his assessment of Anthony Bennett. And he said as soon as it was hard, he was out. And I was the one on campus at UNLV, and I didn't, we didn't know. We didn't know that until we had him here. And I wonder if 10 years from now, because of NIL, we'll have a better idea of how to evaluate. Because how does a guy react when you give him the money?
Yeah. Well, now we know that.
And you'll have a better feel. I don't know if NIL's been around long enough, and who knows what NIL will look like 10 years from now. But you don't know how these guys are going to react. If at 22 years old, I give each of you $5 million. Which one of you is going to buy one house, one car, find a financial advisor you can trust and invest it, and which one of you is going to go out and buy hookers and blow? And how do you know that? How do you know?
You don't know.
You don't know. Like, I was thinking about this driving in, whether or not I should mention this name with you two savages sitting on either side of me, but I'm just going to throw the raw meat on the table and let you chew. I saw clips all weekend of Baker Mayfield on social media talking about, like, hitting rock bottom, talking about his faith. Guys, that is not the quarterback the Browns drafted. He has changed so much, and you don't know who the guy is you're bringing in, and you don't know who he's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now.
That's the bigger part of it. Who at 22 is who they were when they, or who at 25 is who they were at 22.
And that's why, and you're talking about the most important position in sports, and you're talking about all the responsibilities that these guys have. Who is going to be willing to put in the work?
Yep.
Who is willing, who, because it's funny, like, who has the drive to be Tom Brady? And how do you know that in 45 minutes?
Right.
Yeah.
You don't. And that's why, so I agree with part of what she's saying, but the other part, it's impossible to drill down on these guys and get all the information that you need until you get them into your building, and then it's too late. Because when the Browns got Johnny Manziel in and realized he didn't open the playbook ever.
Now, the problem with Johnny Manziel is he's the outlier. There were too many red flags for them to have missed.
Yeah.
You didn't need 45 minutes with him.
Right.
All you had to do is pay
Agreed.
attention to the media.
But the point is, you don't know until you get them in the building who they really are, and then it's too late.
Yeah,
but I would
in most cases. Manziel, they knew.
What I would say on Manziel, though, is indicative of another problem in the process. I bet the Browns' talent evaluators, their scouts, probably on some level knew they should not draft him.
Yeah.
But if the owner says, I want Johnny Football,
right,
what are you going to do? I wonder, I don't know if we'd ever be able to find this out. I mean, we won't be able to. Maybe somebody will write a book someday. I wonder what percentage of the quarterbacks that flop as first-round picks was there a group within the organization, maybe even the majority of the scouts that were like, don't take him, don't take him, don't take him. Yeah. But either the GM, who's not doing the daily scouting, or the owner overruled them on the decision.
Yeah, it's tough because there's...
How would you know that?
How would you get that data?
Yeah.
And there's, I think, in most organizations, there's always dissent.
Sure.
I mean, rarely is it a slam dunk where the entire organization is on the same page.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think in the case of Johnny Manziel, Jimmy said, "This is my team, and a homeless guy told me to take him.
I'm going to take him." I know with 100% certainty that was the Ray Farmer draft. He wanted Zach Martin.
Right. He didn't want Johnny Manziel. Right.
They wanted no part of it. Was the Manziel Gilbert draft.
Right.
And they wanted.
They didn't want either of those guys, right?
No.
Yeah.
I have in my notes.
Yeah.
Who it was? It was Zach Martin and somebody else.
Right.
And Ray wanted to build the lines. And he wanted to build inside out.
Right.
And Zach Martin. Oh, it was a receiver. It was a receiver who had a decent career. I could find it. Who it was? Who the front office.
The 2014 draft? Is it Brandon Cooks?
It might have been. Yeah, I think that might have been it. It might have been.
You told me that Zach Martin and Cooks were the two guys.
Okay, then that's who it was.
Yeah. It's the hardest position in sports to project, and for the things that you talked about, I had a sports psychologist tell me the craziest thing about the draft is the male mind isn't fully developed until you're 25 years old.
And I would argue it's not at 25.
Mine took to 45.
I'll tell you, let you know when I get there. I'm 48.
I mean, and so here's the part that they say is developing when you're, before you're 25. Decision making and punitive action. So a lot of men, young men, before they hit 25, are making decisions without calculating in the ramifications. Hell, I'm going to do it. They don't even think about, well, what if I get caught? Or what if I get hurt? Or none of that. That's why the number one age group for injuries are, and I don't mean in sports, I mean in life, is young men. Because we jump off two-story RVs onto tables filled with beer to impress our friends.
I jumped out of a plane at 22.
Well, I've done that too. Yeah. I mean, not rational thought, but I did it when I was much older. I was like 45 when I did it. But the thing of it is, the sports psychologists will tell you, it's almost like trying to recruit a player physically before they've matured.
Yeah.
How the hell do I know what he's going to look like when his shoulders broaden and he becomes a man? Same thing. How do I know what he's going to think like when he's 25?
Well, maybe the answer is you got to draft Tyler. What do we decide?
Yeah, draft the guys. Draft the guys that are fully mature.
But he didn't dominate. Like he's a grown
Yeah,
man.
26. He's
a grown man playing with kids, and he couldn't dominate.
Yeah,
them.
that's a red flag.
Well,
so
he didn't have great talent
I think that
around
both
him.
things can be true. Yes, it's easier to because the game that they're playing. I mean, imagine this: they used to recruit guys from triple option offenses and try to make them professional quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Like you talk about round peg square hole. At least now they're playing pro style offenses more in college. So a scout can look at it and say, well, that's our system, and he runs it really well, and the skill set is transferable.
Right.
So it is easier in that vein, but there's still so many unknown variables.
Can I ask a
I think it's
question?
impossible.
Hang on,
to
real quick
project.
for I want to put a bow on something you were talking about, like not everybody agrees. Like you got all these voices in the room, and how do you come to a consensus? I'll go back to the Bennett draft with the Cavs. I think I mentioned this on the show. The vote to take Anthony Bennett was 9-1. I think it was 9-1 within the Cavs, and the one dissenting vote was Chris Grant. He didn't want him, and he got fired for taking Anthony Bennett, and it's known as the worst number one pick in the history of the NBA draft.
And he was the only dissenting voice.
And he didn't want him. He's the one guy that didn't want him, and he got fired for it.
Well, who did he want?
I mean, it wasn't any better.
Yeah.
It was a terrible draft.
Later in the draft, weren't there some good players?
Giannis.
Yeah, right.
But he wanted, I think it was Ben McLemore. So it wasn't. He was better than Bennett, but not by much. But the point is, you just don't know behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And all that's in the book. Like I had all that in the book that I wrote. But you don't know behind closed doors. I mean, the guy who's out there, that's like what I was saying about Barry saying we're not trading Miles. That's because that's what Jimmy's telling him to say. The guy, a lot of times the GM is the press secretary for what the owner is saying, or it's just it's just the consensus.
And he's so convincing that he believes he makes everybody believe.
Maybe he does. Yeah. Maybe he does. But I'm just saying, a lot of times they're putting up a united front, but it's not always that way behind closed doors.
I can say this with certainty, and I haven't talked to anybody inside the building. There is absolutely a 0% chance they come up with total uniformity this year. Impossible. There's no way with all the people they have in their organization.
Unlikely,
Because you know what I've learned from that? I've sat on this panel with 5 different people over the last month, and there's 5 different people that we should take number 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you think that everybody within the Browns organization is going to say,
and by the
here
way,
he is.
By the way, that's healthy.
It is healthy.
When you get into trouble is when you get the group think and you are in an echo chamber
100%.
and everybody's saying the same thing.
Yes.
You want guys arguing, going back and forth. That's how you come, usually, that's how you come to the best healthy decision.
Right.
Mike,
Let me
what's your
ask you
question?
guys this.
I agree with that.
With all the new information we have, we know more about these guys, or at least we think we know more about these guys than ever before. Every pass is charted, and we have access to stuff that we did not have access to before. Does that extra information, in theory, is a good thing? You think more information better. But is there sometimes an overkill of information that you think sometimes the access to all this extra knowledge, the statistics, the analytics, can actually making the decision more clouded than it was before?
Probably.
I think absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the extra access that fans and media have creates more pressure too.
Yeah, because there's an argument to taking everybody then.
Yeah.
And there's an argument against taking everybody.
Right.
Because there's so much info. It's up to the organization to place priorities on information. For instance, some organizations say, my guy, absolutely, this is a non-starter. He has to be above everything else accurate. And then there might be another organization that says, I don't care about accuracy. I need decision-making. Under pressure. Yeah. That is the most important. So if I'm prioritizing the skill sets, what makes a great NFL quarterback? Every team has to do this. What's number 1? Well, one team, it might be decision-making. Another team might be size. Another team might be mobility. Another team might be accuracy. And because of that, all of this information makes it very difficult.
A tangible example to what you just said, 2 different levels. Jim Tressel in college, do not screw up my 3. He told Krenzel that in a game against NC State off a turnover, don't screw up our 3, playing for field goals. Like, don't turn the ball over.
Yes.
Whatever you do, be cautious, be safe.
So Jameis Winston wouldn't have been a good quarterback.
Jameis would have put Jim in the ground. But and I know I've mentioned this a couple times, but I'm just fascinated by it. Then the conversation with Mike Martz about, hey, give me the guy who can throw it through the keyhole because I can rein him in and pull that back. But if you give me somebody who's afraid to make a turnover or afraid to make a bad throw, I can't do anything with that.
Yeah, it's all personal preference.
It is. And it doesn't make one right and one wrong. It just, this is the way we're wired and this is what I want.
But I do think it's very important, and I think this is what the Steelers have. I think that before you can have success, you have to have a blueprint. You don't just willy-nilly build a house and see how it turns out. You have plans, a blueprint. Every inch of that plan is already mapped out. It's easy to build a good house when you have a blueprint. Now just take a pile of lumber, nails, roofing material, and everything, and just put it on a site and say, okay, now build something. Just go haphazardly. That's what the Browns do. The Browns try to invent it as they go along. As an organization, the Steelers are about great defense and running the football. Why? Because of where they're located and the division in which they play. They're playing games that are cold weather and defense travels, and the run game is more reliable than the passing game in all weather elements. So it makes sense if you play football in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to have that blueprint. What the hell are the Browns about? Like they've
now,
got
Steeler fans would argue the blueprint's been a failure. For
they
the
haven't
last
won
decade.
anything without since their lead quarterback retired.
If that is the bar for failure, then yes, they have been.
Yeah.
My bar for success is meaningful football in December.
Right.
When was the last time Pittsburgh played a game in which a playoff spot wasn't up for grabs? I can tell you this, it never happened in Ben Roethlisberger's career.
Yeah.
Every time he stepped foot on the field, even his last games of the season, in the years in which he didn't make it, there was a path to go there. How many football games have the Browns played since Ben came into the league to now? Have their playoff hopes been alive in the month of December?
Right, but that's it. I mean, the team.
No, I get that.
Yeah, but the teams that have the quarterbacks always have a chance.
Correct.
Yeah.
However, what I'm saying by this is they've got a plan. There's been a point on their horizon, and it hasn't changed since the 70s. If you start plotting the Browns' points on the horizon, the reason they've never gone anywhere is because they don't know where they're going. They're going in a million different directions. Let's find an owner who hires and empowers a general manager to, what's our blueprint? What are the Cleveland Browns going to be about? And then you hire all of your scouts, all of your coaches, and draft all of your players that have the skill set that can take you to where you want to go. Don't buy a Maserati if you're going across the country. But if you need to go someplace fast, buy a Maserati. But what are we about? And
they have a system that works for them.
Yes.
The Browns don't have a system. Now, it's a chicken and the egg. Do they have a system because they've had success? Or do they have success because of the system?
I can answer that for you.
Yeah.
It is the chicken is the owner. The egg is everything else.
Well, yeah.
The egg came from the owner.
Right.
And in this case, the Browns, they're very top of the food chain, the tip of the pyramid, is willy-nilly. What's he about? Look at the players he's drafted and the variety of skill sets that they've had. Well, when you look at the Steelers, they build a great defense. They always have a great defense. They're always strong on the defensive line. They always have a good offensive line, and they can always run the ball. Okay, that's translated from the 70s, 50 years later. The Browns, just like if you try to describe what kind of team they build, you're going to come up with everything under the sun, and none of it's worked because they keep changing their point on the horizon.
Right. But now, when they've actually been consistent with coaching and GM, a lot of people have complained about it.
They have been consistent.
Yeah.
However, have their decisions been consistent? Or are they still doing what the owner ultimately wants them to do?
Well,
and for that,
that's
I'll just
always
give
a
you
factor.
Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
I just think that I don't care. I've been told that I'm wrong. I'm going to die thinking this. Deshaun Watson was in Cleveland because that's who Jimmy Haslam wanted. It doesn't happen if he didn't want it.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that he's the one that wanted it, and you get what you get. Now you're paying the man.
Well, they were going to have to move on from Baker anyway.
Okay, let's not relitigate that. But what I would say to that is there are other things. It's not like he was the only girl at the dance.
At the time, to me, it seemed like a no-brainer, and I think most people felt that way. It turned out not to be.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to that's actually another great example of a rookie class, and where are these guys mentally? There was no way for the Browns to know what kind of mental, emotional damage was done to Deshaun based on those X number of year and a half. Whatever.
I'll give them a pass for that. You're right. You can't measure that.
And I when I was at the owners' meetings right after they got him, we did one show shortly after I got back, and it was a flippant comment. I remember you were hosting, and I flippantly said, there was talking to people at the owners' meetings that wonder, like, what kind of lasting impact will this have on him? And we both sort of dismissed it, like, but it's very real. But it's impossible.
When the final book is written, by the way, I'm still hopeful that there's a chapter out there unwritten. I'm told he's working his ass off.
He posted a workout video, comeback video.
And I'm not even talking about the video, because you can make a video in 40 minutes that makes it look like you're working 8 hours a day. I've heard he's putting in the work. And so maybe this isn't the last chapter. Maybe, because if the skill set is there, but it was always this, these can be rehabilitated. There's a history and a past of guys fixing this muscle.
First of all, the shoulder never looked right to me last year.
No, I know. That's an issue, too.
And that was a rare injury that there's not a lot of history of quarterbacks coming back from that. And now you add 2 Achilles tears on top of it.
I know.
I have firmly in the camp he's played his last snap for the Browns.
I think he's played less than the NFL.
Probably.
That is overwhelmingly the thought.
Yeah.
But I'm, you
never know.
Is there a chance? I saw Michael Vick come back from prison and play at an incredible level.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm by no means am I predicting it, but I'm also not writing off the possibility that he comes back for somebody and plays a serviceable quarterback position.